Oliver Yonchev.
Hi, good mate. Thank you. Hey everyone. I think I gave everyone palpitations when they saw that I had 100 slides in 20 minutes, so do bear with me. I'm here today to talk about everybody's favorite topic. You either love it or you hate it, artificial intelligence. More specifically in the context of creativity. And to kick this thing off, I want to put it to you guys. So I want you to be brave. And would you raise your hand very high if you think AI sucks at creativity? Come on, I know there's copywriters that have been on LinkedIn going, ChatGPT shit, for 2 years. Now is your moment. Look, if you think that, you are not alone, because Liz doesn't stop at creativity. She cannot find a user case for AI unless it was capable of doing the dishes. I feel you, Liz. Zoe is confident about her job. She feels safe after she interfaced with a DPD chatbot. And Vex Werewolf isn't a fan of generative design, but he did find it objectively funny that the words "I just farted" continued to be inserted into the image generation. And look, I'm going to tell you my personal issue. I am amazed by many of the things that are happening in the space. But when I go onto LinkedIn, I just see a lot of garbage. I'm going to keep it real with you. Sometimes we see some novel and interesting things, maybe funny. We see a lot of pointless fusion. You know, this is a hamburger sneaker, to reference McDonald's. And unfortunately, when brands get involved, most of what we see is rather bland. And if I think about this in the context of creativity, I don't see wonderful displays. However, I do see a mind-blowing technological advancement that I think in many respects we've become desensitized to. There's a phenomena called the hedonic treadmill, and it basically dictates as we experience more and more, our baseline expectations increase and we feel dissatisfied. And I certainly feel that about AI. Things that delighted me, things I thought were magic a year ago, I don't think the same today. I am going to park AI for a second, and I'm going to tell you personally what creativity is to me in the context of this industry. So for me, great creativity is the thing that is an expression of my feelings. You know, when we use it in marketing, we can influence how people think. Ultimately, we use creativity to influence action. And if we get it really, really right, great creativity can convey so much by saying very little. If we get creativity really, really, really right, it can speak to our internal monologues. Beautiful thing. And if we get creativity really, 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 really right, then it can transcend time. Things that were relevant 30 years ago can still be as relevant today. And when I think about my personal experiences of 15 years doing creative work, I think about the technology, and it wasn't irrelevant, but it's kind of invisible. And that is the point about AI and creativity. Great use of artificial intelligence should be invisible. And when you understand this, this changes your relationship. And I think only good things can happen. Okay, I have 15 minutes and about 70 slides, so there's 3 things I'm going to hit you with. Number 1, I'm going to go a little deeper on the topic of AI and creativity, and I'm going to try and persuade a few skeptics in the room. Number 2, if AI can be creative, what is the impact? And number 3, how should you respond? How should you respond? Okay, big question. Can AI be creative? It's not a simple question. It's not a binary question. It's rather complex. And it's rather complex because you need a few ingredients. Number one, we have to agree what creativity is. As a subjective construct, that is not as easy as you may think. And number two, we need context of the industry. We need to know more about AI, and we need to know more about the direction of travel. And fortunately for all of you, smarter people than me have tried to tackle creativity. And Margaret Bowden wrote a book in the early 90s called The Creative Mind that distilled creativity into mechanisms. She described them as three things. Number one is combinational. That's me taking a singular idea or a concept, another idea from somewhere else, and combining them in new ways. The next form or mechanism of creativity is exploration. That's taking a concept or an idea and showcasing it in a new way or taking it into a new territory. And then the third is transformation. And often, this is what people conflate creativity with. They conflate it with transformation, or in other words, originality. And this is the one actually where most people struggle. This idea that a computer can do this innately human thing. It can be absurd, it can be original. They don't like that thought. And many skeptics look at the mechanisms of artificial intelligence. And AI is a bit of a catch-all for many things, but when we speak about it in the context of our industry, we're talking about generative AI. We're talking about large language models. And it will often be likened to predictive text. Foundationally, that's how the technology works. We're looking at a series of possible outcomes and making a recommendation based on that. Doesn't sound very creative. However, I would challenge that thought because I don't think it's that dissimilar to how I create. Forget what Margaret said for a second. My creativity comes from my lived experiences. My creativity comes from the content I consume, the skills I develop, how I combine different inputs to create outputs. And fundamentally, that's exactly how large language models work. And I have complete empathy for why people find this idea that a machine can be creative. It's jarring. We have come to believe that computers are binary. They're ones and zeros. They're rational. They're good at yes and no. They're deterministic. They're not very good at spontaneity. They can't be, right? Well, we are moving into a new era where computers are no longer just deterministic. They are probabilistic. And if you think in the simplest terms, in a single ask, in a single prompt, you in theory have endless possibilities. And I would argue endless possibilities is the foundation for creativity. And look, if you are not convinced, I'm sure there will still be skeptics in the room. I'm going to ask you to zoom out. When most people try and understand topics, they get into the weeds. I think if you truly want to understand anything, you need to zoom out. You need context. So I'm going to dive into AI for a second, and I won't start at the beginning because that will take too long. The term artificial intelligence was coined back as far as 1967, but I will take you to the generative era. The moment we all got introduced to ChatGPT 3, I think was the moment where we had that delightful experience that went, this is different, this is useful. Maybe I can copyright now, all of those things. If I go over the sort of last couple of years, one of the biggest advancements in AI is this ability to take text across other modalities. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that text can now be an image can convert to video, and this is because large language models are built on this ubiquitous thing that is language. And when I talk about language, DNA is a language, code is a language. So when you have an advancement in one field, you have advancements across all, and this has acted as a real accelerator in the space. And well, what is the outcome of the last few years? Well, we have seen the startup economy, we have seen enterprise build applications and software and tools that leave us with two states right now. We have AI that removes all friction, and you put very little effort into the creative process, and you get a generic, basic output. This is what 95% of what we see is. However, there's this second paradigm, which is AI plus skills and effort. And you can get phenomenal outcomes. That's the photographer that masters Mid-Journey and specifies which camera to use, which lighting, which article. All of these things matter, and this is quite encouraging for the creative industries. I'm going to fast track to where we are today, and there's a really important point if you're taking on the idea of AI and creativity. We tend to think of creativity as a very spontaneous act. It's actually more mechanical than we would like to assume. It requires advanced reasoning. And now models are going through a real evolution where they are getting smarter. And if I kicked this to you and said, right, I'm putting a piece of paper in front of you, I would like you to write me a story right now, you get one go, even the best, the most creative amongst you wouldn't do a very good job. And fundamentally, that's how we've been interfacing with AI. But now, through advanced reasoning, we move from single prompts or single shot prompting to something called chain of thought reasoning, which is exactly how we behave. When you go to write a story, you stop, you validate, you research, and now AI is doing all of those things. I will give you one quick nod to the future, which is a term that you will hear a lot if you're interested in the space, AI agents. And a lot of people confuse automation with AI agents, and you hear this phrase, the agentic era. And in its most simple form, think of an AI agent as an AI application that is trained to do one thing that speaks to another AI application that is trained to do another to complete a task. And why this is really relevant for this industry is we're effectively moving from having passive tools, I go to ChatGPT to help me with X, to now having an active contributor. And this is extremely vital in the creative industries, because if I, again, throw a question to you right now and said, what is the best piece of creative work that you have ever done? I guarantee it's probably not been done in isolation. It's being done as part of a team. It's the amazing strategist that found that unique insight, that then went to your creative director that's an idea factory that turned that into a beautiful concept, that then went to an art director that translated that into beautiful visuals. It was teamwork, and now AI does all of those things. And we are advancing at such a pace. And I will say, I am always humbled by this stark reminder. We do see some amazing things. We have become desensitized to technology more broadly. And I remind you, this is the worst. This is the slowest. It's the least effective this thing is going to be. And it's goddamn fucking magic, in my opinion. So, how will this impact us in this room? I'm going to take it to you. I have some good news and I have some bad news. And of course, I will start with the bad first. If you are not very good at your job, you're fucked. Like, I actually mean that. There's a quote I love from the chief creative officer at Accenture Song that said, he said this about 2 years ago, mediocrity is free to everyone. Humans have to step up. And that beautifully and poetically embodied the state of play today. I do have some good news, though. I will get to the good news. If you are good to great at your job, now is our time. I just call myself good then, but I think I'm all right. Now is our time, and I'll tell you why. So the last couple of decades, left brains have ruled the world. These are the people that could create the most economic value. Engineers, scientists, fucking accountants, anyone with a left brain had certain advantages in the world. And yes, right brains, creatives, we made people laugh, we entertained, maybe we shaped culture. But now we move into a new era. An era where computers speaking natural language. So if you have an imagination, if you have incredible creative skills, you are no longer bound by technical limitations. And this gives creatives goddamn superpowers. So, copywriters, if you're complaining about ChatGPT, get over it. Focus on distilling language into something poetic and beautiful. Focus on the headlines. Designers, you hate your back-end guy, fuck them. You can do it yourself now. Editors, no budget, doesn't matter. You're in your bedroom, you can imagine any scene, any voice, anything you like. And creative directors, you don't like people, you don't have to work with them. You can do it on your own. And this for me is real hope for our industry. And the hope is a very human one. Okay, how can you respond? What do you do today? Well, I'm going to say by attending this talk is probably a first step. We live in a world geared by algorithms, which means we're in this perpetual state of feeling like we're left behind or we're missing out. The truth is you're not. You're not left behind. If you've made an intentional step to use an AI application, you're way ahead of the curve. And if you are a creative, I've got kind of 3 areas I think you should focus on as you think about technology and how it can aid, influence, and augment your work. I distill technology and creativity into 3 areas: inspiration, production, and distribution. And I'll start with inspiration. There's a quote from Ethan Mollick, who's the AI professor at Wharton. And he said, "The problem with being human is we are stuck in our own heads. And a lot of the bad decisions we make are a result of us not having enough perspectives, not having diversity of thought. And the wonderful thing with AI and having super intelligence in your hands and pockets, you now have infinite perspectives." And one actionable tip I would encourage everybody here to do, I call it building your knowledge base. And what is that? I just mean documenting things that inspire you in a rational way. I use Notion. There's a tool on there called Notion Clipper. I see a cool bit of content, something interesting. I can clip that, document that. That becomes so integral to the creative process. And there is now zero excuse to stare at a blank page and not know what to do. You all have co-authors for a notional to zero cost. And one of my favorite user cases for inspiration, I have a friend that uses a really old AI model to eliminate generic ideas. I thought that was beautiful. Uses old technology to get rid of the boring, the bland, and that pushes him in a direction of originality. Okay, the second pillar is production, creating things. I won't harbor too much on this, but what I will say is now post-production is magic. It really is. Even the most naive amongst us in terms of applications, software editing, we can do a hell of a lot today. And I am a big believer, it's a really interesting period where we can now think about our own personal creative processes, and we have an opportunity to automate away the things that we hate. And if you do that, that creates more space. And the number one thing that creatives don't have in modern marketing is space. 50 clients, 50 briefs, social media, content here, fragmentation. What AI allows you to do is create space. Just don't tell your boss. The third thing, and this is probably one of the most important and overlooked aspects of the creative process, everyone spends so much energy on the idea, they spend so much energy creating the thing, and they think very little about their distribution. They think very little about how fragmented the communication landscape is today. Well, now AI is a wonderful content multiplier. You can create one asset that's beautifully thought out, and you can do 1,000 versions of that thing. You can take that YouTube video and automatically translate it into 30 SEO articles. This is a fascinating time to augment around the fragmented world. And I will say, all of this comes together to mean that it is easier than it's ever been to create, which I believe is a wonderful thing, but unfortunately, for most people, it's harder than ever to stand out. And I say unfortunately harder for most people because creatives, AI really does give you superpowers. And I think human plus machine can bridge the gap between conventional creativity and transformational creativity. Okay, finally, just to recap a few points. If you raise your hands to the question of does AI suck, I would like to remind you that human beings do a really bad job of producing shitty things too. We don't need AI to do that for us. An important point to note about AI, stop focusing on AI, focus on great creativity. It should be invisible. I'm very excited by the idea now that machines don't just take instruction, they can now be active contributors in our work. I think that's a wonderful thing. A consequence of that means if you're not very good at your job, it's probably gone within 2 to 3 years. But the bright side of that is in a low to no code digital world, creatives rule. And there are people out there like Wint, who's a very creative mind. He said, you don't like my AI generated crap, I'll generate some people who do, then I'll generate $10,000, then he'll generate a wife. God bless Wint and his creativity. Thank you so much. I'm Oliver. I do a venture studio. I invest and build marketing companies with talented creatives. So check us out. Thank you.